Am I excited for Matt Brown versus Robbie Lawler? You can bet your sweet ass I am. Let me put things into perspective for you, a quick little narrative. Robbie Lawler was the hottest thing in the UFC back in his early 20s, late teens rather. Comes in, starts knocking people out, some fight of the night candidates, then gets upset by an early talent, Nick Diaz. Has some struggles in the UFC, makes his way up to 185, gets triangle choked by Evan Tanner. That leads to his exodus of the UFC. Outside of the UFC, he has some hit or miss performances at 185 pounds, wins some titles outside of the UFC, and then he starts slowing down a bit, but win or lose, he remains an exciting fighter. Makes his way back to the UFC, cuts to 170 pounds. And then fights a very high favorite in Josh Koscheck. Upsets Josh Koscheck in a fight that he was losing, then gets Roy McDonald. He's a huge underdog against Roy McDonald. Goes out there, blasts Roy McDonald for 2 out of 3 rounds, wins that fight, then gets a title shot against Johnny Hendricks, and I feel sorry for you if you did not watch the slugfest that was Johnny Hendricks versus Robbie Lawler. Robbie Lawler has since won an amazing fight versus Jake Ellenberger, and will look to continue his streak against well, not a streak, but line of impressive performances rather against Matt Brown. And you know what, I must add, I did leave a fight a fight out as his second fight in the UFC, but whatever. And then Matt Brown. Matt Brown's nickname is the Immortal. It just seems like it's a MMA trendy nickname. What is it going to be? The Pitbull, the Axe Murderer, the Predator. It's actually a very relevant nickname for Matt Brown if you've done your research on this man's history. Matt Brown isn't just called the Immortal to be akin to, say, a superhero. This guy was literally pronounced dead. Former drug addict, heroin addict in Ohio. This guy is from the slums. He was pronounced dead. Not only was figuratively, not even somewhat resurrected, but has gone on to make a run at a life in mixed martial arts, much less than the top 10 in the most stacked division in mixed martial arts today. This guy was cast off on The Ultimate Fighter, won a couple, lost a couple, wasn't really doing too well, was probably just about on the chopping block. Then he got a slew of wins. After getting a slew of wins, he got some more wins. After getting some more wins, he got some more wins. Lo and behold, he's on a ridiculous win streak. The longest win streak in the UFC at the moment, I believe. This guy is just come from nowhere, really. As someone who looked to be just a mid-tier gatekeeper, if that, for the UFC. His record still, after all those wins, he's still like, what, 19-12, 19-11, something along those lines. But you look at this guy's wins, he is a violent fighter. This guy fights like a freaking drug dealer would fight if someone owed him money. He'll take guys down and elbow them and just bludgeon their body with knees. It's just dirty violence. This guy's got knockout power from the standing position, wrestling very much so improved, submission ability, it's much improved, high level as well, training out of American Top Team and also the East Coast. This guy, he's got some skills and very much so improved skills. It's tough for fans to not get behind this guy. That is, if you know what it is. So you've got just two fighters going against each other that were at time rejects, both very exciting, bringing just high level offense, throwing caution to the wind, both of them. I'd say more so Matt Brown than Robbie Lawler as far as throwing caution to the wind goes. If there is any weakness in Matt Brown, it would be his defensive abilities. This is a guy that takes a lot of punishment in his fights. He's not an easy guy to finish. I don't believe he's ever been knocked out in his career, but you know, he will throw his chin out there. And Robbie Lawler, a lot more defensive savvy, but leaves a lot to be desired on the ground. I mean, who knows where he is on the ground these days? His wrestling has been very much so improved. He can actually defend takedowns now. If you pressure this guy, he's not going to make it easy for you. He'll throw up a head kick. So his biggest weaknesses have always been his ground game, if you can take him down, and also somewhat his leg kicks. This guy's got a history of getting beaten to the legs, and I'm not just talking a fight early in his career that he lost. against Pete Spratt. Also, a little later in his career, he fought a tough Melvin Manoff and was getting eaten alive with leg kicks before knocking Melvin Manoff late in the first round. So this is a guy that if you open up with the leg kicks and avoid his knockout power, you could have some success. As for how I see Matt Brown approaching this fight to Robbie Lawler and vice versa, I believe this fight, it's going to be of Robbie Lawler's best interest to keep this fight standing. Robbie Lawler is definitely, in my opinion, as I view fights, my humble opinion, the superior fighter on the feet. He's got a strong chin. He's got incredible knockout power, amongst the best pound for pound in the history of mixed martial arts. This guy has just got devastating, vicious, violent knockout ability. Matt Brown, he's a guy, he's more of a the death of 1,000 cuts type guy. That's not to say that he's going to work, go in and out of the pocket, work a crisp jab. This guy will, eat you up alive with shots here and there, but it's more so he does it in so many angles and so many positions, and his cardio, when it doesn't fail him, really, that's one of the differences is Matt Brown. Which Matt Brown's going to show up. If he trains well, his cardio comes through for him, he can really put it to anyone. He's got a very high, fast pace. He throws a lot of volume, where he doesn't have the power of Robbie Lawler, he does have the tenacity, the ability to throw punches and kicks in succession and just stay on top of you when you hurt, put you in a submission hold. I mean, this guy is much more well-rounded than Robbie Lawler, but it just goes a matter of what you value more when looking at your prediction of this fight. Do you value Robbie Lawler's strengths on his feet, or do you value Matt Brown's strengths as an all-around fighter? I mean, Matt Brown, it's tough to say what his game plan is going to be. If I'm Matt Brown, I'm going to be trying to take down Robbie Lawler. His takedown defense is impressive, but when set up with strikes, I feel that Matt Brown will have a decent chance to take down Robbie Lawler. Robbie Lawler is not a guy that's impossible to take down, even in his improved 2.0 version. Robbie Lawler does have a good sprawl, but he gets taken down. It's just you're not going to be able to knock this guy out with ground and pound. It's just this guy can take some vicious offense. If you're going to beat up Robbie Lawler, it's going to be with some beat him up wouldn't be the right phrase, but if you're going to defeat Robbie Lawler, it's going to be by a back and forth decision or submission. And Matt Brown, I feel like his wrestling is a little bit better than it gets credit for. If you look at early in his career in the UFC, he got taken down by Jung Hyun Kim a few times, and Stun Gun is actually a very tough fighter, and that was early in Matt Brown's career. But since then, he's been a tough guy to crack. He hasn't been out wrestled. He hasn't been out wrestled much in his fights. He's, showing some pretty good offense in the wrestling department, especially in his last fight against Eric Silva, a fight that was just one of the best fights of the year, maybe the best round of the year so far, round one. That fight was a gem from start to finish. Matt Brown takes some just ferocious liver kicks and somehow comes back to make it, dare I say, one-sided affair. That fight was just that fight was something out of Dexter. But I like Robbie Lawler in this fight. Matt Brown, everyone's been picking against Matt Brown for a while now in most of his fights, but I don't think he's fought anyone at Robbie Lawler's level yet. His toughest fight has probably been Eric Silva, or Robbie Lawler. I feel that it's just he's not going to bring a very presentable game plan to Matt Brown. If there's guys that Matt Brown can take down and look good against in the welterweight division in the top 10, Robbie Lawler just isn't one of them. In order to take down a guy like Robbie Lawler, you're going to have to be able to just light him up with your hands, or you're going to be able be willing to take some heavy, solid offense. And Matt Brown does have a good chin, but I mean, I wouldn't put him up there with, say, a Jake Shields yet, and a guy that is so relentless in presenting his grappling offense. Matt Brown, does have some things he can bring to the table. You know, close quarters, elbows, knees, they're brutal, but I just think Robbie Lawler does it better. He's a lot more technical. He's as I mentioned, a lot more defensive savvy, and you know, it's not as if taking down Robbie Lawler is the end of the fight. If you take him down, that's one thing. Keeping him down is another. Johnny Hendricks couldn't hold him down, and there's a multiple-time NCAA wrestling champion for you. You know, Rory McDonald took down Robbie Lawler and did next to nothing with it. So Robbie Lawler, since he moved to American Top Team, has just got a tremendously improved guard, a tremendously improved wrestling. So where I do think that it's not outside of the pale for Matt Brown to take this fight, I feel the more likely of scenarios would be Robbie Lawler by decision. I think he can win an impressive 5-round decision, if not perhaps a knockout. I don't see Robbie Lawler getting a knockout because Matt Brown is just so durable, but wouldn't really surprise me too much. But yeah, I think Robbie Lawler wins a pretty dominant 49-46, 50-45-ish decision. Robbie Lawler, you know,